Peace, mercy, and blessings of God be upon you, and welcome back to Join the Mahdi. I'm your host, Ardijan and Mahdi.
And I'm Alexandra Al-Mahdi.
So, this is an interactive program for those who don't know. We are live right now, and if you would like to call in or request as a guest on the TikTok platform, you're more than welcome to do so, and we will be taking up calls in about 5 minutes. So anyway, without further ado, without any delay, let's talk about the topic that we are going to be talking about today. And obviously it is pertaining to joining the Mahdi, but also we have to bear in mind the struggles that people face when joining the Mahdi. And there are people that have many struggles. But most of the struggles that we have seen is struggles that in its root and its essence is just something that is within our own selves. Mm-hmm. It is really something that the Arabs would call the nafs, which is the self of a person.
Yeah. So, Imam Ali, he said, everyone's devil is their own self. Right.
Yeah.
So like we all basically have this devil inside of us, and the real Prophet Muhammad he described it as like the greater jihad. Basically the biggest battle is with our own self, and all of the prophets and messengers, they actually taught this doctrine to deny the self, deny our own selves, because the self, the ego, it is kind of this obstacle in the path to God. It's like a stone in the path. Mm-hmm. It's something which is standing in our way always. And it is kind of like the route to evil.
Yeah, it is.
And Aba Al-Sadiq, from his piece, he's actually provided a lot of information on the human ego. He said that it is this illusionary, false personality, basically. And it's built up of, it's like a big bundle of emotions that lives in the chest. And it's kind of built up on all of our previous experiences that we've had in life, a combination of all of the ways that people have treated us. So, these emotions and these feelings, basically, that we have as human beings, they're something that are an illusion. And there are something that we have to overcome. And all of the people who fell who were believers in the truth, is because of the nafs, because of the ego. Aba Al-Sadiq, from his piece, he even said the reason that Judas Iscariot fell and betrayed Jesus was because he hadn't done what the other disciples did, which was to discipline their nafs and become the owner of it, make the nafs submit to them, submit to the soul, which is what the aim of religion is. This is how we truly spiritually elevate, by overcoming this kind of darkness which is in the chest, and reach a different dimension, basically.
Yeah, and the nafs is something that many religions have talked about, whether it was Hinduism and Arjuna's dialogues with Krishna, or in Buddhism, where the person denies himself in order to reach nirvana, or basically this state of enlightenment. And in all the religions, really, there is this aspect of denouncing oneself. When it came to even Judaism, you find that the prophets and messengers had to do great sacrifices that pertain to their own selves, and they destroyed their reputations in front of the people in order to deliver God's message, even if it risked their reputation being tarnished, them being seen as liars, and even having to give up that which they loved and held dear. Jesus himself, when he was gathering disciples and followers, he told one man, he said that if you want to follow me, well, you would have to get rid of everything that you own and give it to the poor.
Yeah, and that was a hard message for the ego to have, because the ego is like, it's the I, right?
Yes.
Like it wants the best things for itself. Like it wants money. It wants like the best clothes. It wants the best foods to eat. Like it wants to hold on to money and be rich, and it becomes attached to things. So when the rich man was told, you have to, in order to be a companion of mine, in order to be a follower of me, you have to give up all of your money, all of your wealth, and all of your possessions, and give it to the poor. And that was like a very heavy message for the rich man, right? Because he was attached to his wealth, through his ego.
Yeah, he was attached. And that's the thing, is that the ego or the nafs is attached to these things. It is attached to anything of the worldly life that is provided for it. Yeah. And, it's a big topic, and there's a lot that we can delve into regarding this. But what I really wanted to focus on really is just how dangerous this self can be. It is so dangerous that it ends up making people not follow the messenger of the time, because the messenger of the time is doing something that the ego doesn't want to do.
Yeah.
The ego is being told by the messenger of the time that you have to give up your wealth, give it to the poor, because you need to basically feed people, and you have to take care of others before you take care of yourself. That was a very unattractive message that people didn't like. Well, mainly the rich didn't like it, but the poor, that was something that they were okay with. But then even with the poor, they even had standards that they had to fight against in terms of their themselves. They, for example, following Jesus, even if it meant, for example, that your family, that essentially that you would leave your family. One of the people, they said, Jesus, look, I'll follow you, but let me just say goodbye to my relatives.
Yeah.
And then Jesus' reply was, those who, that basically...
Those who pick up the plow and then look back are not worthy, basically, of working. And he's talking, about working for the kingdom of God. And, another one of his followers said, let me go and bury my deceased parent. And he said, let the dead bury the dead, because we have to let go of these things and, focus on the main mission, what is important. And what is important is following God. And this is why the ego is always that barrier in our path on the way to God, because it's attached to our way of life. It's attached to the people in our life. It's attached to our money, our possessions, and, the things that we own. And these are the things that we have to give up, to get closer to God, because it's part of the world. We cannot stay like immersed in the dunya, in the world, and also please God at the same time. If we want to get out of this dunya, this world, then we have to kind of leave it behind. The true religion, is following God, and it's building a world where we put humanity first. We put our other fellow human beings before our own selves, and this is the way. By when we're all united in doing this and following God, this is the way that we turn the world into a paradise. But the ego, it wants to stay with this me first ideology, which is from Iblis, it's from Satan, where we put ourselves first. We store away all of this money, we store away all of these resources, we store away all of this wealth, and we take more and more than our share, leaving others with so little, leaving others without. And this is, exactly the world that we're in today, right? It's gone so far, right all the way down to the epitome basically of me first, where we have all of these billionaires and, Elon Musk about to become a trillionaire. And we have 9 million people starving to death every year, which is 25,000 per day, basically, because of this me first, people following this me first ideology, taking so much more than they need, and leaving so many other people without anything. And this is because of the nafs. The nafs is telling people that they need more, they need to get this. And Aba Al-Sadiq, from his piece, he's clarified in one of the episodes on the Mahdi as a peer channel, it's called Submission to Allah is the key to enlightenment. And he said that when we follow our own desires, when we follow the nafs, we follow the ego, we actually, this isn't a way, it kind of is telling us, if we get this, we'll be happy. If we get one thing, we'll be happy, then we get another thing, we'll be happy. But it actually leads us down a path where we become more and more unhappy and more unsatisfied, and we just need more and more. And Abba Al-Sadiq, from his piece in this episode, he said that God hid the happiness of a human being inside their fellow human being. So actually the way that we can make ourselves happy is not by getting more and more things for ourselves, it's actually by making other people happy, by doing things for other people. This is where God, he hid the happiness of a human being. And it's so sad when you look at the state of the world today, because people, they don't understand this fact. They haven't had a messenger, they haven't had a guide in such a long time that the majority of people have followed. So they've been following their own desires, following their own wants and their own ego impulses, to this extent where they become more and more miserable, and they don't understand, where happiness is. And, this is why Aba Sadiq, from his piece, he said that, we have all of these rich and famous people who they end up, committing suicide or becoming drug addicts, because, they don't have this key to happiness.
Yeah.
Or what they have is a key to unhappiness, and they think it's going to make them happy, so they keep following it, and they're going in exactly the wrong direction. So, all of these extremely wealthy people, who are, you know, deep down extremely unhappy, the way that they would become happy is if they gave away their wealth. You know, if you have these billionaires, if they actually decided one day, you know, I'm going to give all my money away to the people in the world who are starving, to the people of the world who don't have a home, you know, who don't have the basic necessities. I'm going to decide to give all of this away. That is something that would truly make them happy and at peace, but they just don't understand that fact.
No, of course they don't understand it, and they don't understand it because the ego is, the self of the human being is afraid of change. Change is a very scary process. No one likes change, really, because it takes you out of a state of comfort that most people are in, and puts them in a situation where now they have to go through the the trials and tribulations of their choices or the things that are happening with them. So like imagine that kind of drastic change, especially for a rich person, that they have to that all of their luxury and all of their wealth and all of that which they accumulated and all the forms of entertainment that they have accessible to them because of their wealth, they have to now give all of that up. And the reason why they're giving it up is for the sake of other people, or it's for the sake of God. That is something extremely difficult. It is something that most people cannot stomach to do.
But you know, it's like the ego has a really good way of like convincing us that we're dependent on something, that we cannot live without something. We cannot. But as soon as we actually get to the point where we change that and we're just like, okay, you know what, I can accept this, like I can, it's not like, it wouldn't be that bad. And as soon as we make that decision and we change it, we can reach this point where we kind of are at peace. You know, Ahmed al-Hassan in The Goal of the Wise, he says, you know, when you resist your nafs, you just like resist it, and then like eventually you'll feel this feeling of peace. You know, when we resist our impulses, it really just leads us in the opposite direction, and things that we think like, you know, we could never live without that, or we could never do in that situation. You know, we are like underestimating our own ability to adapt to situations, because, you know, as human beings we are actually adaptable. We just need to have that mindset change. We just need to be able to be willing to change, you know, and just to understand that, you know, we don't have all the answers. We don't know what we need actually. We don't know what's going to make us happy, you know, in the reality. So yeah, for sure, it's a really, really important topic, and it's a hard topic. You know, it's like it's simple in a way, but it's the hardest thing to do. You know, it's the biggest battle that every person has to face is with their own self. You know, to resist their own self, to make it submit to them, and to discipline it. And it's something that, you know, every believer, you know, we have to do.
Yeah, of course we have to discipline our nafs, because the nafs, the Ahlul Bayt also described, is like a raging animal, really. It is pretty much this out of controlled entity that you need to put a yoke upon, that you need to put in chains. And you know, unless we do that, then we are going to end up harming others and harming ourselves. I mean, look at all these people that have no self-restraint when it comes to this capitalist idea of me first, and you know, well, you know, you're the loser because you didn't get it, and I took what you wanted.
Yeah.
You know, this caused, as you were saying, the death of 9 million people yearly around the world. 25,000 people die every day because of starvation and related causes. And now, due to that, I mean, now think of it in that sense. If it's that sense in the physical sense, but then what about in the spiritual sense?
Yeah.
Well, in the spiritual sense, if a person is not able to control his self, then the pathway that he goes into is a pathway that leads him to suffering and torture and leads him to ultimately unhappiness.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's why, you know, as you said, and that's what Abu Sadiq said, God placed your happiness in the happiness of other human beings. If you make other people happy, you yourself become happy. So, okay, then what about the state of God that we're supposed to bring today? Well, you know, the state of God that we want to bring is a state in which all human beings become happy, but it is accompanied also with sacrifice of your time, your youth, all the years of your life, to dedicate it to building that state. You know, everybody wants to live in comfort, but nobody wants to sacrifice their comfort for the betterment of mankind. But if the people do that, and that's why the companions of the Qa'im are here, and that's why the Mahdi is here, is that the companions of the Mahdi, they are here to establish a divine just state. But the way that they do it is they let go of everything. All that they're attached to, all of their ego, all of this sensitivity that they also have. Everything must be dropped from them in order to procure for themselves and for humanity a divine just state, because they would have to be the leaders and the role models for that divine just state to come. So for the believers, you know, I mean, the Imam made it very clear, and Abu Sadiq made it very clear that the self is not your friend. You are your own worst enemy, pretty much. To the extent that actually the word shaitan is actually applied on the human being in a way that most people didn't see. You know, the thing is, Alex, for those who speak English, you know, the word shaitan is mainly translated to Satan, right? Yeah. Or, you know, the equivalent for that, Satan, right?
But the actual meaning of the word is something from clay.
Yes.
Right? And this is the human being, you know, we are made from clay.
Yes, exactly.
So, like, this is, you know, we are our bodies basically are the shaitan. This is what we have to overcome, like, in order to fight evil. Basically.
Yeah, exactly. So if we are the shaitans, and, you know, I think maybe people are now confused. How is it that it translates to something of clay? Well, I mean, you know, that's the beauty of it. The beauty of it is that there has been no scholar, there has been nobody who has come forward giving a correct definition of the word shaitan. You know, Abu Sadiq, he comes, you know, through his father, Imam Ahmad al-Hasan, and it was explained so easily that shaitan is basically two words, shay and tan, shay and teen, right? Like the shayateen, right? So you have shay and tan. Shay means something. Tan means clay. So something from clay. So that's why you'll find, you know, the shaitans from mankind and from jinn, or the satans from mankind and jinn. I mean, how is that possible unless, you know, the jinns, you know, or the human being is equivalent to that which the verse is talking about, and obviously it is something from clay then. Yeah. Which is, you know, something that blew our minds away years ago when we found out about this revelation, because, you know, I mean, nobody was just able to make sense out of it. And now we know why. The Prophet said, you know, everybody's shaitan is his own self. Yeah. Or the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, why they said the shaitan of everybody is their own self, is because you are a shaitan. That's the thing. Yeah. And what we're meant to do is we're meant to put aside our nafs, put aside our ego, and allow our soul to shine through. And you know, that's the scary thing, unfortunately, about the Quran that is present between the hands of the people today. Most translations that translate the word nafs in the Quran, and nafs means the body, it means the self of the person, the ego, the I. Nafs is myself, right? But ruh means soul. So these are two different things. There's a nafs and there's a soul. Yeah, yeah. But for some reason, the people who translate, whether it is out of ignorance and whether it is out of deliberately misguiding the people, and God knows best why they translated it this way, but for some reason you find translators translating nafs to soul. They're translating self to soul. I mean, that's equivalent to like saying, you know, that fire is water when fire is not water. They are two completely opposite things.
And it just shows the confusion of the people, you know, because like we were saying earlier, you know, it's always been a part of the religion that we have to deny ourselves. This is what all of the prophets and messengers taught. But yet we see like these kind of twisted versions of the religion today where it's kind of like, you know, follow your own will, you know, like in Christianity, we see like, you know, this belief that Christians have that, you know, every Christian has the Holy Spirit. So it's kind of telling people, you know, whatever you want, that's what the Holy Spirit wants. You know, this is your will, you know, despite the fact that, you know, all of these Christians, you know, have these different wills, they have these different wants. So it's a very weird and confusing message. And it's almost like echoed in Islam, you know, when people say that, you know, following the Quran is enough for them. And, you know, this is the whole of the religion. We just have to follow the Quran because it just leads to so many different interpretations translations of what the Quran means, and this is why we have all of this division within Islam as well. And if there was a unified message in either Christianity or Islam, then we wouldn't have division. We wouldn't have all of these different sects and denominations that we see today. So it's really, it's something that is such an important part of the religion. I think it's something that is completely missing from the religions today. And, the reason for that is, most likely because people don't want to do it. People, this is why, also Aba Al-Sadiq, from him his peace, he said that people, they love the messenger who's dead, but they don't like the messenger who's alive. So it's very easy for us to say now that we love Jesus and we accept Jesus and all of these things that the Christians say about Jesus, because we don't actually have to accept him. We don't actually have to accept his teachings if he's not here speaking to us. And this is what we see playing out within Christianity. We see like so many rich Christians, so many rich evangelical Christian churches in America. We see the Vatican, which is this hugely wealthy organization, and the whole of the religion of Christianity is just completely contradicting the teachings of Jesus, because it's so easy for us to do what we want when we're not following the living messenger. And this is something why it's so important that we have that living messenger, because he is the one who is actually giving us instructions. We can't just, if we're following him, we can't just distort his teachings and do what we want. We have to follow him. We have to do what he says, and we have to deny ourselves. And I think this is a lot of the time why the people, they rejected the prophets and messengers, because they didn't want to do what he's saying. They wanted to follow their own selves. They wanted to follow their own egos. But when we follow our own selves, this is the doctrine of Iblis. This is what Iblis did. He didn't want to prostrate to Adam. He wanted to be better. He was arrogant. He was jealous. All of these qualities which come from the darkness, come from the ego. He wanted to do what he wanted. He wanted to worship God in his own way. But, unfortunately, that is not the worship that God accepts. So, when we follow our own egos, when we follow these emotions like jealousy, like arrogance, like thinking that we're something, or, wanting to stay attached to things, wanting to dig our heels in and do things our own way, then unfortunately we have to accept that we are following in the footsteps of Iblis. And this is not the way that we get close to God.
Yeah, no, it is not the way that we get close to God at all. Iblis, he said, God, let me worship you the way that in a way that nobody has ever worshipped you before, if you allow me to not prostrate to Adam. And God says, he says, I don't want to be worshipped the way that you want to worship me. I want to be worshipped the way that I want to be worshipped.
Yeah.
And that's another thing about the self too. The self, Abu Al-Sadiq, he has described it, the Imam described it as this bottle of emotions, or like this, basically chest of emotions, you could say, right?
It's just bundle of emotions.
This combination of emotions that a person has within their chest area, right? And these emotions, they have wants, they have desires, they have fears. So it's always that whatever it is that whatever it is that the people want, if it is in contradiction to God, then it is not the soul, because the soul, and that's the thing, is that the soul actually is something that is wanting the best interest for God. It follows God's commands to the T. However, when it comes to the nafs is a totally different story. The nafs, there's narrations that talk about how, the story of creation, right? How God created the intellect and told it to go, then the intellect went. Then he told it to come back, and it came back. Then he told ignorance, and some would even say that this ignorance was also the ego, right?
Yeah.
To go, and it went. But then when it was told to come back, it didn't come back. So the ego, it does not really obey God. And if it obeyed God, it only obeys him maybe partly and not fully. It has its own interests. So then what is it about the nafs that we can do to determine if we're following it or not? Well, one thing that I think encourages people is this hadith that is in the books of the Shia, right? Which is, and I believe it's also in the books of the Sunnis, if I'm not mistaken. But basically, it's a narration that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, "O my servant, I want and you want, but it's not going to be except for what I want. If you give me what I want, I will give you what you want. But if you make me tired over what, but if you do not give me what I want, I'll make you tired over what you want. Until nothing happens except for what I want. So that's something that when you think about now, it's wow. It's like, no matter what you would want, no matter what you do, if it's against the will of God, well, you're not going to be satisfied. You're not going to be happy. You're not even going to be able to even reach it, even if you thought that you reached it, because at the end, you're not going to be happy anyway.
Yeah, because, everything is God. Everything good that happens is from God. No one is able to go out there and get something that they want and, satisfy themselves. The only peace, the only happiness that we're going to get in this life is from God. It is by submitting to God and doing what God wants. And, like the narration states, God says, if you give me what I want, then I will give you what you want.
Exactly. So at the end of the day, when we do what it is that God wants from us, even if it's against our own selves and against our desires, the end result is that it's going to be good, because that's what having faith is. Having faith is to expect good. That is the definition of faith that we have in this dawah, the expectation of good. Why? Because why is it that you believe in anything? Why is it that you say that you have faith in your parents, or that you have faith in your doctor who is going to put you under surgery? It's because you expect that the end result from these individuals is it's going to be good. It's going to be maybe a bit of a struggle, but the end result is going to be amazing. So it's the same thing with God, is that why is it that we should have faith in God, or even the person that God has appointed, that is a human being that eats like you, that sleeps, that gets tired, and all these things? Why is it that you should listen to someone such as the Mahdi? Well, it's because if God is the one who sent the Mahdi, and God is the one who is commanding through the Mahdi, then whatever the Mahdi says and is from God, if you obey it, and you follow him, no matter how difficult it might be for yourself as a nafs, at the end you will achieve what you wanted to achieve. And that's why in the Quran, what does it say, right? There's a nafs, right? But there's also something called the nafs that is reassured, the reassured self. And what does it say about the reassured self? It says that regarding the reassured self, and alhamdulillah we have it on the screen, where it says, the Imam from him, his peace, replied, the self is this cluster of all the feelings and emotions which is inside every creature. The reassured self is the self which is in the state of harmony with the pure soul that inhabits the same body which it inhabits. It is called the reassured self because it is reassured with the pure soul in its body. So the self of the person becomes fused, I suppose, with this soul.
It becomes something which is aligned with the soul.
Yes,
they're not in battle anymore. The self is something which it's become disciplined to the extent where it's submitted to the soul. It doesn't want anything that the soul doesn't want. And this is the stage that we have to get to. This is the stage where we can actually eradicate the darkness inside of us. And this is it's true spiritual elevation. In the episode that you were in with Aba Al-Sadiq, from him his peace, a while ago, he's talking about, this spiritual elevation that we have to fight off, because another way of describing it is also this narration about the soldiers of ignorance, right? Because the soldiers of ignorance, which are described there like their jealousy, fear, not faith, I can't think of the word, but all of these other negative emotions like anger, sadness, they're all coming from the nafs, basically. All of the soldiers of ignorance, they're all something which are from the darkness, and we overcome them. We overcome the ego by empowering the soldiers of the intellect, the soldiers of light, basically. And this is how we enable our soul to become reassured, ourself to become reassured with the soul, and how we can reach that stage where we can become a different kind of being. We can learn how to become like God, and have these attributes and characteristics which are from God, whereas the attributes and characteristics that the majority of the people have right now are from Satan, they're from Iblis, they're from the darkness. They're this jealousy, this me first, taking from other people, oppressing other people. The episode that I'm talking about is how to become like God. The only way is following this method. So yeah, it's by, overcoming these soldiers of darkness, basically, and we can only do that by being around really the man who is appointed by God, because we can reach like certain levels of spiritual elevation on our own, for sure. We can overcome certain characteristics. Every human being has a basic idea of what forgiveness means, like what mercy means, to forgive other people when they've done us harm. But one example that was given by Aba Sadiq, from him his peace, in one of the episodes where he's talking about this subject, is like around the time of Joseph, right? The brothers of Joseph had harmed Joseph so much, they threw him down this hole, basically. They left him for dead, and because of them he was separated from his family and in prison for such a long time. But when Joseph was reunited with his brothers, he just immediately forgave them. And because of this act of like extreme forgiveness from Joseph, the brothers, they learned what true forgiveness is, which can only be kind of reflected through the messenger of the time. So it's like we as humans, we can understand like certain levels of these characteristics, but we can only like learn them in a true way when they're being manifested through that man who is appointed by God. So this is why it's so important that we learn about this, why how that we have him, the man who is appointed by God, the Imam of the time, that we're following him, so in order that we can truly overcome the darkness.
Yeah, it's all due to just following the Imam of your time, and that's how you know where it is that you're at in terms of your spiritual elevation journey. It's all about dissolving the nafs, and that's how a person becomes like God too, right? Is that once you dissolve yourself into God, once you have let go of all that which you desire and only want what God desires and implement what God desires, then you are filling in the shoes of what God wants from a person. You become a tool in his hand. You become like how the prophets and messengers were, where sometimes it would be stated, it was not David who threw, right, but it was God who threw, for example, exactly. or it was somebody from the Ahlul Bayt who threw, right? Or it was we, as what is stated that that threw, and that's the thing, is that as we fight against ourselves and as we decide to go on this journey with God, the more we become like God. And I don't mean by like God that we become God himself and that we're equal with God and that we become independent from God. No, this is not what we're saying, and this is an impossibility. This is something that even Iblis himself fell into, where he was comparing himself to the high king, God essentially, and was saying that, hey, I can create too, and this and this and this, and then he made it very clear to Satan that the only reason why he was able to create was because he allowed him to have the ability to create. That was the only reason. It's kind of like giving somebody the manual to do something. Well, the person doesn't have the manual anymore. I mean, what's he left with? He's just left with maybe the material, but doesn't know how to put these materials together in order to create something. So that's the thing, is that just as the Quran states when it says La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, or that there is no strength and no power except by God or Allah. The same thing applies here, that there is nothing that a person does or can do except that God had willed it and God had allowed it. So, that's the thing now, is that, God has given us the power to move, to breathe, to speak. What we do with that, what we do with this power and ability now is up to us. Are we going to use it for godly actions and attributes, or are we going to use it for the complete opposite? Now the choice for the human being is there, whether they will ascend to a godly position or descend to a position where they're like Iblis or even worse.
Exactly. We all have the ability as human beings to like reach this level where we elevate, to be as like the angels, or we have the ability to degenerate rather, and become worse than the animals. It's kind of all in our hands. It depends whether we're going to follow these animalistic qualities, like greed, like lust, like all of those other ego driven emotions like jealousy and these other ones that I mentioned before, or whether we're going to be able to overcome them, whether we're going to be able to deny ourselves, deny that ego, deny that part of us that wants to follow those impulses, and become, as Abba Al-Sadiq from his piece has said, higher than the angels. This is what human beings can become. It's kind of all in our hands, and we're kind of like unique in that way, that we really have the ability to become whatever we choose to become.
Yeah, and the Imam actually gave a very clear way to for the human being to know what is stronger, the soul or the nafs, right? Because there's this aspect that many people have talked about, how, there is the good self, there's a bad self, or there's a good soul, and then there's a bad soul. People have this concept everywhere, right? And, how is it that we can know if we are obeying God, or that we're more in tune with our souls, or are we more in tune with our selfish self? How can we know? Well, one method that the Imam talked about, which is actually a very interesting method, and anybody now can practice this at home if they would like, and that is, see your reaction whenever you are given happy news or sad news, or when something shocks you. Where is it that you would place your hand?
Yeah.
Do you place your hand over your head? Do you place it over your chest?
Or your leg.
Or do you place it on your leg, like on your lap? And, why am I saying that? Because actually the Imam, he said that, these basically these involuntary actions is correlated to the soul and the self. So if a person puts his hands on his head, then the soul is more in control than their nafs. If a person, however, puts their hands on their chest, like when they're sad or they're happy, and then they're like, ah ha ha, or they're, they're sad and they're just like, then know that your nafs is more in control than your soul. Basically, your nafs is more powerful than your soul in terms of who's controlling the body and your actions. If you put your hands, however, on your lap, like when a person laughs, they tend to slap their when a person laughs, they slap their legs, or when bad news reaches them, they start slapping their chest. But anyway, then the lap or the leg basically is that it's in between the soul and the nafs are equal at that point.
Exactly. And also the episodes of Aba Al-Sadiq, from whom is peace, and the Goal of the Wise, they mention this story basically, about the two wolves, and this is kind of like a well-known, it's kind of attributed to being like a Native American legend, but it's actually a parable that's from Jesus originally, and he's talking about these two wolves that we have inside of us, and one of them is the good wolf, which has all these positive qualities, of the good self, like kindness, compassion, calmness, faith, and the other one is the bad wolf that has all of these bad attributes like anger, selfishness, jealousy, like etc. So it's like a competition that we all have inside of us of these two wolves, and the one that wins is basically whichever one we feed. So if we're feeding our anger, if we're feeding our jealousy, if we're feeding our negative characteristics, we're feeding our arrogance, all of these things, then this is the wolf that will become victorious. This is the self that will become victorious. But if we feed our kindness, our compassion, our selflessness, our faith, our happiness, all of these other characteristics, then the good wolf is the one which will succeed. So it's very formulaic actually, and it's very simple what we have to do, but it's just a matter of making that choice basically to stop feeding that bad wolf, and to understand, when we're having these bad characteristics. So I think as well, without the messenger, we don't really understand which attributes we have are really negative and which attributes are from the darkness and things like this. It's hard to get there on our own. And the Goal of the Wise also states that the good self is stronger than the bad self. So when we do a good deed, it strengthens the good self more than a bad deed strengthens the bad self.
Yeah, it counts as a good deed counts as like 2 points.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas a bad deed counts as half a point.
Yeah,
or like half a negative point.
Yeah,
basically.
so God didn't make it like hard for us, it's not something that's too hard to do once we know what we have to do. And it's just about, whether do we want to make that decision, do we want to make that decision to let go of the world that we're in, to let go of these things that we're attached to let go of this picture that we have of ourselves, these things that we feel that we need, are we ready to let go of all that in order to get closer to God? That's all that we need to ask ourselves as people. So it's such an interesting topic, and it's such an important topic, and it's always good to get a reminder. I think I've got a lot from this conversation.
Yeah, I think we all had a lot, and it's a good reminder, really. It's because why? It's the human being tends to think that it knows best. The human being tends to think that it's smart, it's intelligent, and that it can figure things out on themselves. We tend to become very arrogant creatures, as a species, And we tend to also lie and fool ourselves. I mean, I'll give you an example. I mean, you said something which I believe is 100% accurate, which is that, you know, without the messenger of God, you wouldn't really know what is right and wrong, you know, and that's a fact. I mean, you have people today that still debate whether or not, this kind of capitalistic mentality that people have, or basically greed, whether greed is a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah, is that fair? Is that justice? You know, is it right that if someone's working for a lot of money, they should receive so much more money than other people? This is what, you know, some people have been coming up and asking recently, and it's, you know, it's understandable. We don't have the ability to understand what's right and wrong. You know, we're getting our views about things, you know, from these people who are appointed as leaders over us, you know, who are not appointed by God. They're the ones who are appointed by Satan. So of course they have perpetuated, propagated the ideology of Satan and not the ideology of God, you know, not the message of the prophets and messengers. They have, propagated this evil ideology onto us. And this is what people have absorbed, you know, this is what people have grown up with. This is what people have been taught is right and wrong. And it's actually a very different idea than the true right and wrong. So this is why it's so important that we have that messenger, we have that man who's appointed by God, because I think when we hear Aba Sadiq, from him his peace, explaining things, it's like, you know, it makes so much sense when we hear it. It sits right in our heart. It's like the message that we've been waiting to hear as humanity, but we've just been like separated from it for such a long time.
Yeah, no, we have been, and the one who's brought us back and the one who's made us realize that is the Mahdi, whose name is Abdullah Hashem Aba Al-Sadiq. From him his peace. He was the one who made sense out of our own evil inclinations and the soul and the nafs and all of these things pertaining to this topic. And it is such a wide topic, really. And for those who, because we're running out of time, if anyone wants to learn more regarding this topic, well, check out The Goal of the Wise, because there's a whole door or chapter dedicated to the self or the ego.
Yeah.
And I would recommend the people to read into it. You'll find a lot of what we have said here from the book. And there's also videos pertaining to the self and just how dirty and nasty and just how ungodly it is. And yeah, there's a video in the screen right now.
Body,
it is called
self, ego, and soul.
Body, self, ego, and soul. Ego is your worst enemy, and truly that is the case. So okay, then, you know, it's up to us now. And, you know, the Quran says, you know, regarding the soul, it says that they ask you about the soul. Say that the soul is from the command of your Lord, and nobody knows anything about it except for a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's the thing now, is that are we going to follow the man that knows about the soul and can teach us about the soul and how the soul can overcome the nafs, and which lies within it our own happiness in a way? Or are we going to keep on chasing this worldly life, this dunya, this fading world, in which, you know, no matter what we do in it, no matter what kind of fairy tale we tend to tell ourselves before we go to sleep, hoping that, you know, we can grind the next day to acquire as much wealth as possible. Is that going to make us happy or not? I'll find out at the end. Yeah, if you want to stick to that mentality, you're more than welcome to. But, you know, I think it's
you know,
clear.
one thing we can say to anyone watching is just ask yourself, you know, what has made you happy in the past? Because this isn't just some theory, you know, this is the reality. You know, it doesn't make us happy doing what we want. It doesn't make us happy hoarding money and getting things. And anyone will be able to relate that when we tell ourselves, you know, when I just get this next good job, or when I just get this new like thing that I want to buy, or like new PlayStation I want to buy, or new like fashion or anything like this, when I've got this, I'm going to be happy. And then when they get it, they aren't happy, and they just need another thing and another thing and another thing, and it's just like this endless list of things that they need in order to make them happy. And when we follow that line, you know, we just become more and more unhappy. And then, you know, why don't you just go and do like a little experiment, you know, just go and do something nice, do something that's completely selfless, help someone, you know, help someone who you know in your life is in need of help, and see how that makes you feel, you know, in comparison with just buying things for yourself or doing things for yourself or like keeping things for yourself, and see, you know, what actually causes you to feel fulfilled, what causes you to have peace, because for sure, you know, the reality is that doing things for ourselves is never going to give us peace. And you made a really interesting point recently. You were talking about how, like, you know, these people who are like extremely wealthy in this day and age, like they have got like you know, they have caused the oppression of so many people by like having that wealth, and that's all going to be on their backs basically. That's going to be like, you know, preventing them from ever feeling peace, from ever feeling fulfilled. But yet they're kind of going in the opposite direction. They're still trying to get more and more money, thinking that's what's going to make them happy. But at the same time, they're just adding to their own misery by like oppressing more and more of their fellow human beings.
Yeah, and I wonder, really honestly, I really wonder how these people can sleep at night, because my God, imagine the amount of blood and suffering that was wrought from your own hands, and you know about it. I mean, that is something that I don't think any decent human being can live with.
Yeah.
But these guys, unfortunately, they can live with that apparently. But I guess that's in the apparent. I'm pretty sure in reality, it's always in the back of their brains, like what they're doing.
Yeah.
But anyway, I guess that's all that we have today. It's a fantastic topic. It is something that Abu Sadiq really blew our minds away with, and there's just so much to talk about regarding it that we cannot do in one show. But we hope that the audience out there, that you guys out there, pick up this book, The Goal of the Wise Behind Us, and read it. It's a magnificent book that will help guide you through your way to know God. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.